there's two places that a self-published author should spend their money, and that is in editing, and that is in cover design. Those are just a cost of being in the market. And if you're serious about it, you will be all in. It's like any career. You don't just, stumble upon it and become well known as an expert in your field unless you put in the time and the effort and take it seriously and treat it like a business.
Hello, my writerly friends. I'm Victoria, author, editor, and the owner of Blue Pen. If you're not familiar with Blue Pen, we offer editing services for both independently and traditionally publishing authors, and we provide book design and self-publishing services. So we have with us today a longtime Blue Pen client and one of the most talented authors I have ever had the privilege of working with. We've worked on 4 books together. Her most recent is called All That Was, and it is fantastic. She's going to tell you about it in a little bit. She's also going to talk about her writing and publishing journey and her experience working with Blue Pen. So without further ado, the fabulous Tanya Williams.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy writing schedule to come hang out with us.
My pleasure.
Okay, so to get started, can you tell us a little bit about your writing background? How did you get where you are?
Well, I think I've probably been writing ever since I was a small child. My first memory of telling a story was when I was about 5 years old, and I was sent outside to play. My sister and my mom had horrible seasonal allergies, so if I wanted to play outside, I had to do so by myself. So I think that probably started the imagination going, and my first memory is I was creeping along beside the alfalfa field. We lived on a farm at the time, and there was a sort of a wide grassy swatch that I was allowed to play on. I wasn't allowed to enter the field, but I was allowed to play on this long patch of grass. And so I would crouch along beside the field, and I would talk to the crickets, and I would tell them a story. And I vividly remember being so lost in the story that it would take my mom rapping on the oversized picture window to draw my attention, because when she did that, the whole window wobbled like it was liquid, and that was so mesmerizing as well. So it took something just as engrossing to pull my attention away from the story, and so I think it just grew from there, and I've been entertaining myself for years.
I love that.
I didn't share any of those stories with the world, though, until I was in my 40s. So,
yeah. So, what made you want to write professionally and to start, publishing books?
I think it was always a passion. I always wanted to tell a story. When my son was born, I had this newfound nap time scenario. Which was bliss for 2 hours every day, and I thought, okay, this is the time I'm going to write a novel, and I did. I sat down and started writing, and then I started taking some writing courses, and part of the course was actually a one-on-one with a local author, where you give a few of your chapters, and then you have a one-on-one interview afterwards. And when we sat down, her reaction was so strong. She just kept saying, okay, I don't know how to say this, but you have to keep writing. You can't not write. And at first I was very flattered, and I was like, oh, that's so sweet. That's really nice. And then that stayed with me for about a week. And all of a sudden fear crept in. And I was like, I am not ready to share my words with the world. I'm not sure that I can handle the criticism or other people's opinion of what I write or any of those things. So, I was about 9 or 10 chapters into the novel, And I remember going to the office and taking those pages and shoving them in a box. And they stayed there for about 17 years.
Wow.
And then I needed to make a life change, and we owned a business at the time, and I needed to have a healthier, balanced life. And so my husband was like, "What are you going to do if you're not, running this business all the time?" And I said, "I think I'm going to write." And of course, to him, he was like, "You haven't written anything. Why would you do that?" And so I did. I jumped with both feet and said, "No, I'm going to make a go of this, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna be brave enough to do it." And that was the best decision I have ever made. Living your passion is incredibly tied into your own personal happiness. So
I love it. I love that story especially because I think some people feel like, either they miss their chance to start writing or they don't have maybe the education that they're supposed to have to be a writer. And, that just shows there's no one path to becoming an author. It's never too late, and it's never the wrong time if it's the right time for you,
very well said. Absolutely, I agree with that. The later, as I started writing, I actually remember reading about the author of, I'm going to remember the book. I love the book. The Literary Potato Peel Pie Society. That she wrote that, I believe, in her 70s, and that was her one and only published work. And she didn't quite see it through to finish. She worked with her niece to finish it off. And it's brilliant, and it's an amazing book, but that's exactly it. It's never too late. You still have breath in your lungs. You have time to write.
Yep.
Do what you're passionate with.
That's great. So you write historical fiction. What drew you to the genre?
I'm a history nerd. Just through and through. My favorite class in high school was Western civilization, and the architecture of through the ages. The historical research is a rabbit hole all its own. I could spend as much time researching as I do writing, but you just have to have a cutoff. You have to actually, okay, this is what I'm going with, because otherwise I would never have a book written. I would just be researching. And so I am drawn to just about any era, but I do have my favorites. I do prefer 20th century. I think I can relate a little bit more to 20th century than I can, say, early Egyptian era. But it's just preference, I think. And a lot has happened. Like, I think technology and the way that humans communicate and move about the world has changed the most dramatically in the 20th century. So there's a lot of material there. Oh,
sorry, I have a ladybug friend.
Oh,
she heard and wanted to join the party.
It's too cold here for ladybugs now.
Oh, really? Yeah, I imagine it's a lot. It was 80 degrees yesterday here.
Oh, boy, I do miss that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's snow in our forecast. That's unusually early for us, but yeah, they were supposed to get some snow today, so yeah.
Oh, for those of you who may not know us and where we live, I live in East Tennessee and Tanya lives in Canada. So, yes, this is common conversation fodder for us.
And coveting somebody else's weather.
Oh, man. So, okay, let's take it back to the first book that we worked on together. That was Becoming Mrs. Smith. What led you to seek professional editing that first time?
Well, I knew that if I was going to take my own writing seriously, it had to be marketable. It had to be the same caliber as all the other books that are on a shelf. If you, as a writer, don't give your reader a solid, good reading experience, they won't trust you. There's that's how you grow your followers, your fan base, your career builds, because people trust that you are going to give them a quality book to read. And editing is a crucial element. It has to be part of that decision. I feel if anybody were on the fence about editing, they should just absolutely consider it. It's a cost of doing business as a writer. That's you. If you don't have your readers' trust, you don't have an audience to write for. Mm-hmm. So, to me, editing is crucial.
I love that word choice, trust. That's such an important part of, I feel like, every aspect of the industry, whether you're talking about the trust between the author and reader, between editor and author. If you're traditionally publishing, then lots of other professionals tossed in there. But
Absolutely. And I think you have to know, as a writer, you don't just automatically know who you are and what you have to say. That isn't always really clear. And I think that having somebody else hold a mirror up for you helps you to find your actual path, your writing path. And I think that editing is valuable in that regard.
That is knocking down one of the big stereotypes when it comes to writers, is that we have this thing to say and we're going to say it in the only way that it can be said. And that's really, I would say that's not the truth most of the time.
Not usually.
It's a process of discovery.
Exactly. And sometimes the characters are the ones that you are learning through. Sometimes the characters have way more say in a story than you intended them to have. They kind of come in and take over sometimes. So it isn't, so many people like to attach the elements of the story to an author's personality. And that's not always the case. I just recently had tea with a friend who said, "Oh, I could see so much of you in All That Was." And I'm like, nope. It wasn't me. There are obviously, there are going to be parts of me in everything I write. But the character she was choosing, I was like, no, that wasn't really who I was resonating with. So it's interesting that her perception of me came out in a different character than I thought. So I think that we all come from a different viewpoint. We're all looking at our own experience and everybody else's experience through our own lens. So it's
which is part of why
what's that?
It's part of why reading is such an amazing thing, because everybody can read the same book and they're all reading a different book.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the ways that I frame it for myself when I release a book, is that when I release a book, it is now the world's book. It no longer belongs to me. It now belongs to every reader that chooses to pick it up, because whatever life experience they've had up to that point is going to be the lens through which they read it. And I don't know going in to writing the book what experiences that reader has had. So you, as a writer, you go in blind a little bit because you don't know what impact your books will have on other people. And my thought is that if you elicit a strong response, whether it's a happy response or not, a strong response. We have one book that's not a nice character, so a strong response is still an emotional response that means that the writer has done their job. That's the way I look at it.
Do you think having that approach has helped you kind of let the book go and maybe better accept reader responses to it, be it reviews, criticism, that sort of thing?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I find that if there is criticism, which every book has criticism without fail, it's because we are all so unique, that we read different books by reading the same one. Every bit of criticism is both valuable but also insightful. A lot of times, the strongest reactions are very telling, not about me as a writer, but as the reader.
Mhm.
It's very telling for the reader, where they've come from and the chord that it struck within them. We're not all on the same path, and all of our wounds of just living heal at different rates and our different experiences. So reading opens a different world, and not just to travel, or back in time. It is an emotional healing process that we are hopefully seeing the world through another person's eyes, and maybe that makes us a little bit more accepting, a little bit more empathetic. So that's the goal anyway.
Oh, I think that's definitely the truth. I know I've said many times that if more people would read, we would have a more empathetic society.
I agree.
All right. So when you decided to seek editing, what were you looking for in a professional editor?
I think in the very beginning, I was looking for somebody to help guide the process. Um, I don't come from a formally trained writing background. I come from my imagination, and that's about it. I don't have a writing degree behind me. So I think I was looking for somebody originally to help me guide that process of exploration in terms of, I mean, it isn't just about the phrases that you repeat far too many times, or how many times your character nods their head, or or anything like that. It's also, an editor helps show you how you actually view the world a little bit. So and how you view your character in that world. So I think that I was looking for sort of an all-around guidance, and I'm a little bit type A, so, or as B plus, as a dear friend likes to call it. I'm fueled by a deadline, and having that accountability is absolutely huge for me. So it doesn't matter what it's going to cost me in terms of lack of sleep or anything like that. I will meet the deadline every time. So
I can vouch for that. 4 books in, she has never missed a deadline.
I think that the negative side of that is I have missed a lot of sleep.
You know,
Minor details.
it's not important. That's really, we'll sleep when we're dead, right?
Exactly. I'll catch up at some point.
Oh my gosh. So I know for new, authors who haven't been through the professional editing process before, it can seem kind of daunting. What were you most worried about or concerned about going in the first time?
That I know for sure. I was actually worried that my voice would be edited out. I thought that it would just get lost in the editing process. And I actually didn't know how I would advocate for it. I I didn't think I had the words, to actually say, but that doesn't sound like me. Like I didn't think that I could convey that completely, and that was my biggest worry. That was what I was most nervous about. That, and that it might be really bad. That was the other part. Of course, if you're a writer, you also have some deep-seated insecurities. At some level, that is, you write in solitude, but then you share it with the world, and those two aren't naturally symbiotic.
I think when you register as a writer, you pick up your notebook, your pen, and your imposter syndrome.
Yes, that's true. I'm going to pretend to be this person for a while.
Oh my gosh, yeah, but worrying that an editor is going to strip your work of its voice. I think I know that's a super common fear. And I guess what makes it even even more challenging is that fear is not unfounded. That definitely happens, especially with editors who maybe aren't familiar with your genre or your specific writing style.
I could see that. Yeah, yeah, I could see that because I wouldn't. I would make a terrible editor. I would make a terrible, terrible editor. But I could see that. Like I couldn't read something sci-fi and realize the difference between what the story was and what the character or the author's voice was. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to separate those
Mm-hmm.
because I don't read enough sci-fi to know. So that's a very good point. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially with fiction, sometimes it's a balancing act. Sometimes even we'll let things remain that may be technically incorrect or certainly not is something that would appear in, say, formal writing. But if it improves the voice or heightens the voice enough, then we'll let it stay. And that's something you have to constantly look at as you're editing throughout the manuscript.
I would say that you excel at that for
Oh,
sure.
well, thank you.
Because the characters, when it comes into dialogue, the characters remain who they are. That's huge. Yeah, definitely.
I
Yes.
appreciate that. I know how important that is. And
Yes. Because that's the only thing unique about you as a writer.
yeah,
Anybody can research, anybody can learn form and function and sentence structure and story structure, but nobody has your unique twist on that story or how you tell it. So that's a crucial element. Yeah, it can't be disregarded. If it's disregarded, then it's not your story.
yes. I mean, you could take Lord of the Rings and tell the exact same story, but if it's written in a robotic tone, nobody's going to get through that.
No, no, it has to be compelling, and it that comes from a certain place, and it's somewhere deep. And I don't know that we could actually like pinpoint it, but it's somewhere deep within the writer. But that's also the flip side of that is also why there is not a single book out there that will be wonderful for everybody.
That's
That's
true.
sort of that flip side. So it's, knowing who your audience is and who you want to write to is also important in how you craft that message.
That's true. And just as an aside, can say that you as an independent author, I think that's one of the reasons that you have been so successful is that you are so good at pinpointing your target audience and writing in a way that you're not changing your style to fit your audience, but you have determined, okay, this is my work, this is the audience who's going to like it, and you've been aware of that in every part of the process.
And that is probably one of the things that I actually struggle with the most because I love my audience. They're fabulous. They're so sweet and kind and generous. And I think we connect because we share the similar level of a viewpoint of the world. But figuring out who they are when you don't know them to begin with is very challenging. And you also walk that line of when you write a book that has a little bit more of an edge to it, how many people are you gonna upset and how many people will you keep, or vice versa. Like all that was is a very different from the Smith family, and it's still emotional. It still deals with a challenging topic, a challenging conversation, but it's subdued in that it isn't pure raw emotion. And so far, I've only seen one person go, I really liked A Man Called Smith better. And so it's interesting because all that was seems to hit a broader audience, whereas the Smith family are very, very targeted in terms of you need to be able to read hard stuff in order to read the Smith family.
I can confirm that. It is definitely worth reading, but if you're looking for the nice fuzzy feelings, it's probably it's not the read.
No, it's not. Yeah, I was in tears writing it, so many times. I mean, it's a good thing I write at home in the quiet of my own home and not at a coffee shop somewhere. Not that you can right now anyway, but that I'm not out in the world writing, because I would be just sobbing writing these very emotional scenes. So
okay, I know I'm tough as far as I'm a tough person to get to cry at books and things. I can't remember the last book that really made me cry. And when we're editing, I would be going over the manuscript, 4 times. So I've read the same lines 4 times, and there were lines in the Smith books that I read them for the 4th time, and I'm still sitting there like getting teary-eyed. I think that's an indication. That's when that's pretty good writing.
Thanks. Yeah, it was very immersive, that's for sure.
Yes.
Very immersive. I think my family was very pleased, especially the second book, Stealing Mr. Smith. I think they were very pleased when I was done writing that particular novel. Having to be in Bernice's head for such an extended period of time apparently made me a little bit cranky. So I don't know. I still got to eat, and there was still clean clothes, so I don't understand.
What else could they want?
Maybe a happier disposition.
Let me tell you, writers out there, if you are working on writing, shall we say, challenging characters that may not be the most likable, and you're looking for a masterclass, check out Stealing Mr. Smith. So good. I can tell you that I like Bernice a lot more than Tanya does.
She's not my favorite.
I very much enjoyed her.
Oh, she's funny. She's got guts, but it's a negative character arc. So, she just gets worse.
But see, the writer that you are, as you're reading it, you keep thinking, oh, Bernice is going to turn it around. She's going to get better. She's going to do something nice.
We hope.
And then, spoiler maybe, but she doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
She justifies it. So.
Yeah. Oh, she's great at that.
Her mom is completely sane.
Oh.
Did I ever tell you the reason that I decided to write her story? Was because I read a quote in a magazine that said, every character is the hero in their own story. And that just seemed to give me permission to be, okay, she can be the hero in her own story. She can be delusional and still be the hero in her own story. And that's okay.
It's definitely okay. I'd say she's not the first. She's in good company.
Yeah, those protagonists that stand out in your mind, they're probably on a shelf pretty much by themselves, but they are very real. They're true to life. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, life isn't always puppies and rainbows.
That's true. You have, the nice happily ever after books, and then you have the ones that are a little more realistic, and they're both. Yeah, they do. I'd say the more negative oriented ones they seem to be the ones that stick with me the most. The happily ever afters just and that may say something more about me than about the books, but
I think it depends on the reason that we read. There are times for things that are lighter and what some people would term fluff, but there's also a whole channel built for Hallmark movies. So that tells you something about our
yeah.
society, that we need that as well. But I think if we want to learn something, or we want to broaden our horizons or broaden our opinions or our thoughts on the world at large, we read hard stuff.
And I'll tell you how I read when I read for pleasure, because I spend all day reading fiction manuscripts and then get off the clock, so to speak, and go read some more. But I'll alternate between I'll read something heavier and, usually a little darker. And then when I finish that, I'll read a nice, fluffy, feel good read. And then
Because you
go
have to
back.
balance it out, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's some that walk that line. I don't know if you've ever read any of Olivia Hawker's books. Um, The Ragged Edge of Night is a hard topic. It's set in Germany, World War II, and it's from the German perspective, which is something that you don't see often. And it's incredibly well written. It's beautiful. But it's so well written that it didn't feel like I was actually having to examine something that I wasn't comfortable examining.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend that one if you
Add that to the list.
How tall is that list?
It's getting there. You can see I have a shelf behind me. I have 3 more in the house, and all the books on these shelves are not read. So it's getting up there. I just got one actually that you recommended. What's the name of it? I forget. The character's name is Completely Fine.
Oh yes, Eleanor Oliphant is completely
That's
fine. Brilliant debut. I loved that book. So people are going to disagree with me.
Well,
that it was absolutely hilarious. I thought it was so funny. People are like, that wasn't funny. That was really disturbing. I think maybe there might be something wrong with me, but it was brilliantly written, and Eleanor was conveyed in such a beautiful but humorous way. I think you'll really like it. It's a quick read.
It's next on my list, so I'll have to read it and weigh in. Funny or disturbing?
I missed. Somebody had an option of books on Instagram, and they were like, "So, which one should I read next?" And I'm like, "Oh, definitely Eleanor Oliphant is so funny," and that's where I got the responses. It's funny. It's not funny. It's disturbing. Oh, okay. Maybe I should not say that. But it is very well written. I look forward to more books from her. Yeah,
that's great. So, back to our questions here. One of the challenges that writers are going to face when they're looking for an editor is you're basically hiring a stranger on the internet. What it comes down to. So, what was it that made you decide to go with Blue Pen?
Well, I think I was very fortunate that we connected early on, like as I was still writing, becoming Mrs. Smith, and we connected on social media. We connected over something that was important to both of us, and we just kind of built that relation slowly, and it grew. And I was probably most impressed with that your communication was so clear. It was upfront and honest and completely clear. So I didn't feel like I was testing out anybody that I didn't know. Like, you made it very easy for me to get to know you. So I think that's probably what it is. I always felt valued and listened to. It's a partnership. Editor-author is a partnership. And I think that if you have a mutual respect for one another and a willingness to listen to each other's point of views, I think that together you end up creating a solid manuscript. I don't think it's just one person that does it. I think it is a partnership.
That is so true. When you're starting editing, you hand over your manuscript, but it's not just, okay, give them the draft and then they give you the edited manuscript. There's so much more. I mean, especially when it comes to developmental editing, you're getting these pages of feedback, and hopefully the editor's giving you insights and suggestions about how to implement it. But you as the author have to be able to take that and apply it and have a conversation with the editor to figure out the best way to move forward.
Yes, you're good at that though. Oh. Like we kind of like, honestly, like once you've written your draft and then you rewrite your draft and then you rewrite your draft again, and then eventually your deadline hits and you have to give it to somebody. So when you hand it over, I won't lie, I'm stressed. It's twofold. I am like so absolutely relieved that it is no longer on my desk anymore. But I'm also stressed because I've invested close to a year writing it, and a lot of, blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifice goes into it. And what if it's really missed the mark? And I don't think that there's been one that I've written yet where I haven't thought, what if I've missed the mark? I say it every single time I send it off to you. I go, I'm not so sure about this one. I don't know if I've hit the target. And I think that's part of the process. But when my favorite thing is in the whole editing process is when we get to have that developmental editing chat. Because all of a sudden, my novel doesn't just have one person standing behind it. It has two. And it's like a brainstorming session. And when you come from a place of writing in solitude and making your own decisions, to joining with another person who is just as invested in the story, and you all of a sudden have all these ideas ignited, and it's like somebody's lit a fire under you because now you're excited about your book again, and you now see where you're writing to. I'm big on lighthouses. If you give me a lighthouse, I can write to it. That is kind of my method. And that's always what we come up with. We end up coming up with whatever lighthouse needs to be shifted or moved or added or deleted. Deleting is not necessarily my favorite part. Occasionally it happens. And I think that is the most exciting part of the whole process, is having your input there for that first time, because you're the first person to read it. And to have that, the yay, nay, or, the insight or something that you're absolutely brilliant at. And I don't know if it's telepathy or magic, but knowing what I purposely omitted because I was either afraid to put it on the page or I didn't want to delve into it because I thought that it was going to be just far too big or too much more than I was intending. So I omitted it. And every single time you say, well, what about this? And I'll be like, how did she know? How did she know again that, like, that's in my outline that I didn't show you? But
that has happened a few times now, hasn't it?
4. So I think connecting with your editor on a level of something that I can't quite put my finger on what that is really important. And I think it's comfortable. If you're comfortable with your editor, then you're both you're both rowing the same way, basically. Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah, I know that when people ask me what's my favorite part of the editing process, that's always what I cite to, is that post-developmental phone call. Because I know from the editor's perspective, I've been digging into this and trying to find ways to make it better. And then I have my plan. Here's my suggestions, what I think would make it better. But then to hear the author come back and take those suggestions and run with them, that's the most rewarding thing. I'd say that's even more rewarding than, seeing the final polished book. Like, having there's that connection and that process of, giving the author the clay to work with, and then seeing them take it and make something that's true to their story and their voice.
Absolutely. I think at the end of the day, we both come to that process as readers. And so when two readers connect over a book, it's like an instant friendship. It's, we're connecting over this together. And so I think it makes the process that much more real, and it's not isolated. And it's absolutely my favorite part as well. Yeah,
That's so true.
I have to say, getting the finished copy is pretty cool.
That's not bad, right?
Not bad at all. Finding typos in that finished copy isn't as fun, but that's on me.
Oh my gosh, I love that analogy though. That's so true. Because so you walk into, or like you used to walk into a coffee shop, if you see somebody with the same book as you, you're immediately like, yeah.
You must have them over for tea. Like,
exactly.
They're now a part of your world.
And it is that same feeling, or it should be. I guess if it's not, then you're probably with the wrong editor, but.
That's true. I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. It should be that comfortable.
So, the next question, which we've kind of, gone over and around, is just tell us about your experience working with Blue Pen.
I would say that every novel is a new experience. It's an opportunity to learn something new if you're open to it. I think that the learning goes beyond the one story. It builds. And I think that every time you go through editing, you build your skill set and you become a stronger writer. And because of feedback, because of insight, because of, I have an actual document on my desktop of things to look for before I send the draft off. How often does my character nod her head and smile? How often does this, that, and key phrases that I actually specifically look for, because they're my go-to when I didn't have another word at the ready. So I know that the editing process makes me a better writer, and that is an education like none other. I couldn't have learned that getting a degree. I would have learned different things and different skills for sure, without a doubt. But I couldn't have learned how it actually applied to me unless I had you to work with. So
learning by doing, it may not be the easiest way, but I'd say it's the most efficient.
I think it's the one you remember the most.
Yeah.
Natural consequences have a way of solidifying lessons in our brain. And I think that the bigger the pain point, the more likely you're going to remember the lesson.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can tell you, editors love to work with authors who internalize those lessons and whose work gets better. And, it's not a given. Some authors are pretty consistent. But one thing that I love about working with you is your work I can see it growing and improving. And, with all that was, you took on even something more ambitious. That face. I don't know if you all saw that because I was the one speaking, but.
Let me just say that was the hardest lesson for me. And so what happened was, at the developmental edit call, it was suggested that I change one of my protagonists' voice from first person to third person. Um, I don't think I was very graceful in receiving that news because I was, it was twofold. One was that I already knew that the two protagonist voices were bleeding into each other. I was aware of it, but because I liked the one protagonist's voice so much, I was just really attached. But the other part of it was, which you didn't know at the time, was that I had actually said out loud to another writing friend that this time I was going to try something new, and I was going to try and write from third person. And I tried and I tried and I tried for weeks and weeks and weeks. I tried and I read books on it and I watched videos and I dug deep into this. And at the end of the day, I went, no, this is too hard. I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can get into this character in third person. So I chickened out. And I did so knowingly. And I hadn't told you any of this. And then when you got it and told me that it would benefit from changing it from first person to third person, I was just like, I don't know how she knows. And what did I just do to myself? Instead of digging in and actually just pushing through with a bad draft, I chickened out. And that's not the first time that you've caught me on that. So every book.
Oh gosh, that one's so interesting because before I recommended that, I really thought long and hard about it and looked at all the other possible solutions because number one, I never recommend a POV change unless it's really, really necessary. And number two, in all the years I've been editing, I think that's the first time that I have ever recommended that it be alternating first person, third person. Normally, it's just easier to keep it consistent for each of your POV characters. So,
Agree.
all of that, but it turned out great.
Did
for inquiring minds.
I can tell that it still wasn't my most natural point of view to write from, for sure. I am switching back to first person for the next book. But what I learned was if I put more effort into making sure that if it's a dual perspective story, that they each are very unique voices, that'll be the key. Mm-hmm. Because I've done it before. A Man Called Smith with two was dual perspective. But because I think one character was male and one character was female, that was a deciding point for me. I could flip.
And you were also, with all that was, you were not only trying to separate the voices, but you had one character was modern and one character was historical. So trying to separate that, and that was the problem. The more antiquated voice was bleeding into our modern character.
She was easier. I enjoyed her. It's funny because I didn't realize, and you know this now, but I didn't realize I had set out to write straight up historical fiction was my goal. I've learned now to not say things out loud to anybody about what my intention is because I get nailed on it every single time.
Life lessons from Tanya Williams. Don't say things out loud.
Don't commit. And I had set up straight up historical fiction. And it wasn't until a beta reader said to me, well, this is really good and all, but you've written contemporary fiction. And I went, whoa, wait a sec. What do you mean? There's it's history, literally woven throughout this entire story. She says, it all takes place in the present day. And it was literally a facepalm. I cannot believe that I did that because that wasn't actually what I was intending to do.
But happy accidents.
It was, in the end, it really was. The funny thing is that since it's no longer in my hands and it's out in the world, most of the reviews call it historical fiction.
Oh, really?
It was really interesting. I made the conscious shift to switch it to sort of put it in the genre of women's literary fiction, just because I take a long time to say things, and so it's kind of literary. um, but it is now been classified as paranormal, and I went, "Ooh, wait."
I mean, it's not inaccurate, but I feel like somebody looking for paranormal fiction who picks this up is not going to be happy about what they find.
It's because it actually came through in a Kirkus review,
Oof.
and I literally skipped right over that first line, and because they did love the book, which was great,
Mhm.
but it didn't trigger paranormal. And then I thought, a couple of people have said paranormal, and I thought, what does people think paranormal is? And I guess paranormal is anything with a ghost.
Yeah.
And I didn't really think about that too far ahead. So, although to be fair, I didn't actually know the story had ghosts until they kind of presented themselves as ghosts. So, again, characters.
What you gonna do?
They will lead you. Step aside, let them shine the light where they want to.
So, this doesn't have to be limited to the first editing experience, any of our editing projects. What's been one really unexpected thing about the editing process?
Oh, I can name two.
Okay.
The first thing that was confirmed for me was that a good editor maintains an author's voice.
Mhm.
That was key. And I probably wouldn't have gone forward with other books with you if my voice hadn't been maintained. I wouldn't have necessarily been able to pick out what it was, but we wouldn't be on the same playing field, I think. So that was huge. The other, and this definitely came across for all that was, a great editor works tirelessly and continuously, remaining in the story's corner. The editor will come and fight for the story, even if it means challenging the author, in order to have the story told the way it's supposed to have been told. And I think that is the difference between a good editor and a great editor. I think that having a comfortable relationship with your clients is always important, but I don't think a good relationship comes without a little bit of nudging and a little bit of pushing a writer to grow. And I think that it was not comfortable to rewrite in third person. And I fought it pretty hard. And it wasn't comfortable to, look at structure again at a later date. But at the same point in time, you always had the story's best interest at heart. And that is the most important thing. I'm not in a relationship with you just to make sure that I've spelt things correctly and, that it's pretty. It really does come down to what is the purpose of the story, and if we haven't hit it, what can we do to make it clear? And I learned that on All That Was, that a great editor fights for the story, even
That's
if they have
really...
to fight against the author.
Oh, not fighting, just like you said, just nudging.
Negotiating.
No, that's really well said, and that's really true. I say that, again, it's very much a balancing act, because while you do have to fight for the story, you have to always be certain that you're not projecting yourself and your biases onto the story. So you have to stop and say, all right, what was the author trying to accomplish? And did they hit the mark? And if not, what can we do to change it and to get it to where they were trying to get it?
I, again, would not make a great editor because I think there's so much, you have to step aside so often so that you can see it so clearly, which is a really incredible skill. And I hazard to guess that not everybody has that skill when it comes to editing. I know I don't, because I've chickened out several times along the way. But I think that it probably stems from building the relationship. If you have a solid relationship with your clients, and your client is showing you that they're willing to do the work and they want to put in the time and the effort, regardless of how much of a struggle or painful it might be, then you're still both going the same direction. So but that's a skill, and I would not say that belongs to everybody. So congratulations, because you do have that.
I tell you what, though, that you just said is key. Not all authors are willing to do that level of work. There are a lot of authors who, if I had given that same recommendation that, okay, it's going to be a bit of an overhaul here, they would have said, well, it's not worth it. It's good enough as it is. Or maybe rationalize in that, they don't agree with me for whatever reason. And, it's the author's book. It's the author's decision. At the end of the day, I, as the editor, cannot make the final decision for the author on which direction they want to go. But knowing that the author is going to be receptive to my feedback and is going to be willing to put in the work and go that extra mile, it makes it a lot easier for me to be honest and open about what the book really needs. Not that I would ever consciously hold back, but, it's that working relationship that it just makes it a lot better for everyone involved.
I agree. I don't think there's well, if your end goal is to entertain readers, to write something that moves them in some way, then I think that you do have to sort of really be behind the story that you set out to write. There isn't a lot of room for ego in writing. You really, which is probably where the insecurity kind of comes in. But you can be a confident, competent individual, but when you sit down to write, it's a blank page for everybody. You start off with nothing. So that's the hardest part, is that very beginning. And if you give up halfway through or at the editing stage where you're not willing to put in any more, then you're selling yourself short, because somebody else believed in you enough that you could tackle those changes and do that work. So I think you would be your best advocate if you actually did invest the extra time, for sure. That being said, I did have a conversation with my best friend that I was like, maybe I should move on to another book. I got a very cursed reply that was like, don't you dare shelve this. So
sounds like a smart person right there.
Oh, oh my goodness. I think she's read the manuscript as many times as we have combined.
Oh,
she read every iteration of it all the way through. And I've never, ever asked anybody to do that before. And she just willingly picked it up and read again. And I'm like, wow, yeah, you deserve a medal.
That is a good friend.
I know, right?
Yes. I mean, normally you're convincing friends to read the finished book, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Often that'll be the conversation with my husband. Did you read it yet? Well, I've got lots of books on my list. I'm like, what? No. I'm your wife.
Yeah, shouldn't you be at the top of that list?
He's like, well, could you maybe start writing something that's like crime thriller? And then I like, that's not what I'm doing.
The day the authors start taking requests,
Yes, can
he'll
you
be
imagine?
first in line.
My goodness. Although I would love to write a crime thriller. I would. That does intrigue me because I do enjoy reading them. I'm just not sure I can keep all those details in my head long enough. That would be my challenge.
I mean, if you can keep all these historical details in your head, I feel like you can manage it because there are quite a few of them.
I have notes and stuff, but I wonder about like the weaving of I don't know if I could weave it. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not confident in that regard.
Just have to try it and see what happens.
You would be very happy, yes.
Oh my gosh. So, we talked about it a little bit, especially with All It Was, but tell us about your post-editing process.
Usually it's pretty easy. Usually.
A qualifier in there.
I would say that it's usually fairly quick. Because of that developmental conversation that we have. Once we've had that phone call and I know exactly where the story needs to be tweaked or where it's going or what I've been reminded that I've left off the page or anything like that, once I have that, I'm ready to dive in and I know what I have to do. And that's usually I'm okay with that. Line editing is really super easy and can usually be turned around in like a few days to a week, mostly because I trust you more than I trust me in terms of culture. And sometimes I'll ask, why is that not right? Because this still sounds right to me, but maybe in Canada we say things backwards. So, which I have been, it's been pointed out to me recently that we do say things differently in some instances. So, but the line editing is usually pretty quick and easy. I read every one. I don't just blindly accept all and send it back to you. I do. I read every single one, but my finger is on the mouse going accept. So, but then I like how we track changes, and so I can write a note in there and sort of go, okay, why are we doing it that way? If I keep this, does this stay the same or does it change? Like, I like that communication happens. So that's pretty easy, I'd say. But I'm also learning about sentence structure with each one. I think we'll see on the next one if my sentence structure has improved. Because it's literally about flipping a sentence in the opposite way, and I'm always a little bit confounded by that. But I will generally just go with what you've suggested because you're educated in that regard and I'm not. And it doesn't sound off. It doesn't sound incorrect or anything like that. But I do check everything. Any hurdles I encounter are usually due to my own lack of trust in my own instincts. That's the key, and probably the biggest lesson that I've learned overall is time and time again, you show me to trust my own instincts. And so if I would actually do that going forward, I think I can see the editing process just getting easier and easier. Mm-hmm. I don't find it difficult.
I can tell you that your writing, the line edits they got consistently lighter. And then with All That Was, in the sections where you were struggling with the plot or the characterization, you could see you weren't focusing as much on what you had learned about concision and the different line editing elements. But that makes perfect sense, perfectly natural. Our brains can only handle so much at one time.
Yes, definitely. And I think it depends on where you are in the, I bet that if we were to sort of lengthen it out on a long sheet of paper, we could probably see that at certain points in each story, my line editing started to fall apart. Because I think I get so engrossed in something that it's gone. It's not my concern at that time. I'm just trying to figure out how to get the character from point A to point B.
I mean, you have to have your priorities in order. So. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you go through, the editing process, and then you self-publish. What influenced your decision to publish independently?
My dad always taught me to learn everything that I possibly could about a business before handing the reins over to someone else who is considered to be an expert. Mm-hmm. Which is valuable, not easy, but valuable and worth the time, because if I ever do take the traditional route, I would know what I wanted from that relationship. I'm going to be the best advocate for my novels and my own writing career. Always will be. And each individual writer will be as well. So not that I know the best decisions always to make, but I will have at least taken on the choice and the decision to research it and find out the way that's going to work best for me. And so I think that my career and my interests will always be protected going forward, no matter which way I publish. Mm-hmm. I think there's huge advantages to self-publishing, and they come at a cost of time. Mm-hmm. But time's relevant in terms of you write your book, it's ready for market, then you spend the time on it. Whereas in traditional publishing, you spend all your time on writing the book, but then you add the time of waiting for somebody else to want it. Somebody else, the publishing houses make decisions based on their business model, not based on the book you've written. Readers make decisions based on what's available for them to consume. So you kind of have to play your odds a bit, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being traditionally published. I think it's great for a lot of authors. It works really well, especially if you write one book a year. I think that's a good model to follow up. I know John Grisham sits down in January of every year and starts a new novel. And it takes him the year to do it, and it's usually released in the fall. And that's his process, and that works well. And he's done remarkably well for himself that way. So there's nothing wrong or inaccurate about going that route. But I do like to sort of have a little bit more of a hand in what I'm doing and the message that I'm crafting. And the nice thing is I get to connect with readers on an almost daily basis, where I hear from readers, I talk to them on social media. There's, I may be an author, but I'm just a person who loves books. and
we all are.
Right? So connecting with readers is that's a highlight. So, and I think that traditionally publishing, you end up maybe a little bit more removed. Mm-hmm. So
I love, that is such good advice. Everything, but understanding everything that you can about something before hiring an expert, that's just, I wish more people would take that to heart, and I wish more independent authors would approach it in the way that you do, as, this is your business, your career. It's not just finish the book and throw it up on Amazon. People might look on indie authors in a different light if more people took it that seriously.
I would agree. I would absolutely agree. That is the one negative I would say about self-publishing, is that there's far too many people who write a book over a weekend and throw it up on Amazon because there isn't enough hoops to jump through. Mm-hmm. So the quality control, a reader doesn't always know what they're getting. But that's where cover design comes into it. I think that a lot of times that we do judge a book by a cover. I'm guilty. I judge wine by the label. So, I'm guilty of that too. I don't always win with the wine though, I gotta say, but with a book, I get, if the book has been properly designed, the book cover, then I usually get what I paid for. Mm-hmm. So there's two places that a self-published author should spend their money, and that is in editing, and that is in cover design. Those are just a cost of being in the market. And if you're serious about it, you will be all in. Mm-hmm. And put the money in to do it. It's like any career. You don't just, stumble upon it and become well known as an expert in your field unless you put in the time and the effort and take it seriously and treat it like a business. Mm-hmm. Plus, if I don't treat it like a business, I won't be allowed to keep doing it. That's just a given, and I like working from home.
It's not bad. I can attest to that.
Lunches, everything gets done and around, and this is the ideal job.
As we're both sitting in our homes at 3:30 on a Monday. It's pretty good.
It's great. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what is, I can tell that you did the research going in. I'm sure that you did not go into self-publishing blind. What is something that you wish you had known?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. It's tough to answer because I've learned so much just through failing, and those natural consequences really do train you not to just blindly, go, okay, well, this person looks like they know what they're doing. Because there is a lot of people out there who are trying to make money off of self-published authors. And they're not always legitimate. And I think if I could have wasted less money and less time, I would be happy in that regard. I also think if I had been writing, without a 17 or so year break, I would have had a lot bigger backlist. So if you haven't started, start now.
That's great advice. You take nothing away from this.
Yes. You can't go back 3 years and have 3 titles behind you. It's, building the backlist is huge. It's said that readers don't trust you unless they see 3 of your books published, because they want to know that you've got skin in the game and that you are committed to doing this. So, and I can attest to that because, oddly enough, all that was is book 4. And I've heard it said, and I didn't quite understand what they meant by it, but I've heard them say, nothing sells your backlist better than a new book. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, all that was released 3 weeks ago. And the Smith series is selling like crazy.
Yeah.
So I go, that works. So right now, start. Don't delay. But then I would be very wary about who you do. It's not so much the money as it is the time that you can't get back. There are a couple of really great resources in the self-publishing world that I would recommend. But a lot of it is just noise, if that makes sense. Yeah. So,
and there's I just did a video about it pretty recently because the last couple of weeks I've had several authors email me and either ask about publishing services companies or tell me that they already purchase packages from these companies that turns out are not legitimate. And it's the worst thing to hear because it's a plague on the industry.
It really is.
And just the realm of self-publishing, it opened up this huge opportunity for these companies to come in and take advantage of authors who aren't familiar with the industry and don't know exactly what they need and exactly what to look for. And yeah.
I think the key with that is that just because you don't know doesn't mean you can't find out.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't learn. And empower yourself and learn what works for you, because what works for me isn't necessarily going to be what works for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
The love of books and genres does go through different cycles. And there'll be some genres that just do really, really well, regardless of the fact that each book is the same story, just in a different location with different characters. They're a highly consumable market, and that's just the way it is. But write what you're passionate about and learn what you need to do in order to benefit your career. I think that's, and you live your whole life like that. You don't just, take everybody's word for it. You have to. Ownership is important. So I think if you want a list of resources that I would recommend, I can happily do that for the at the end of the video if you want.
Yeah, send that along, and I'll at least, if those watching us now, they're probably in the description box if you're on YouTube. That's where I'll drop them.
Perfect.
But yeah. Like you said, it really just comes down to being willing to invest that time up front and do it right, whether it's hiring someone and researching to make sure you're hiring the right people, all of that.
Absolutely. And build relationships.
Yes.
That's crucial in life, but in business, a relationship will serve you so much further. Build relationships with your readers, with your editors, with your cover designer. Be human. Be who you are. That's really our only job in this world, is be you. You can be the best you can be. Nobody else can do it. So,
I feel like in this industry, that should be so easy because we all have this awesome thing to connect about. Like I think every one of us at one point was the little kid stuck somewhere in the corner of the library with a stack of books. We've all been there. We all love stories and connected through this amazing just passion for books.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So, All That Was is released. Give us an elevator pitch. Somebody who's thinking about reading All That Was. I'm putting her on the spot here, by the way. She did not prepare for this.
And elevator pitches are hard because I ramble. In a nutshell, All That Was is the story of being stuck and how that looks for two different main characters that are actually separated by a century. One presents herself as a ghost roaming a historic church that is in a legal battle that may be torn down. She's been roaming the church for 80 years since her passing. The other is a young lawyer who is tasked with archiving the church records and documents and everything like that in the consideration of a relocation for the church, or if they're fought on the land title issue, which is actually based on a true court case in Seattle that was precedent setting. So it's their journey. They're both grieving in different ways, and it's really about coming to terms with that grief and moving forward in life. And it has some really fun and colorful characters.
Yes, it does. I tell you what, I love editing your book. I mean, I love editing your books for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that I always learn something. I always find myself in a conversation with someone, saying, oh, well, I was just editing this book that this historical thing happened, and I didn't know that. Did you know that?
You know, what's really funny, you'll get a kick out of this, because I don't think I actually told you this. In the section of, I don't remember what chapter it is because it's after they're written. I don't retain the chapter numbers. But there was a spot where you wanted me to insert a chapter. And my first thought was, she knows this is historical fiction, right? And so if I have to insert a chapter, I have to go and research something to figure out what's going to go. I literally went to Google and said, what happened in Seattle in 1917? And lo and behold, I learned about the hockey team that won the NHL.
Oh, that's great.
That won the Stanley Cup. And I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a team called the Seattle Metropolitans. And so then, of course, I did like what you did, and I went to my husband, I went to my dad, I went to every man that I knew. Go, did you know this Seattle had an NHL team and they won the Stanley Cup in 1917? And to which they all said yes.
Well, it was a good story to me. I didn't know that.
So it is. I do love the history and the research, and the church still stands today. It's a historic building. I don't know that it has historic designation though, because the lawsuit was overruled, and since that time, it is now the landmarks title cannot bestow a historic building status on a church without the church's permission. So it was precedent setting.
So interesting. That whole story is so interesting. But just, if you're watching, just have to go read the book. Learn about it. So what is next up for you? What's next on the horizon?
I am working on what I think is going to be a series that takes place in Vancouver, Canada. So you're going to get all my U's in all my words. And starting in 1927. So Canada was different from the States. Well, actually, Vancouver was different in terms of prohibition and everything like that. We voted it out relatively soon after it came in. So we did not have prohibition for very long in Vancouver. And so there is a historic building that I would like to set the story in. And I'm still working through the details on that. But it's so intriguing. And it actually came to me while I interviewed some lawyers before I wrote All That Was. And so I was at this lovely restaurant in this wonderful place and meeting with a lawyer. And I instantly was captivated by the building. And so that's where the story idea came from for this next series. So I don't know how many books in the series yet, but I think it's probably going to be my longest one. Definitely to date, if not longest one ever. I don't know that I'll write a series quite this long again. We'll see how bored I get with the same people and see how it goes from there.
All right. Well, that's exciting. It's definitely exciting for me, and I know it's exciting for your readers. Hopefully your husband, who is actually going to read the books without being pressed too much.
He's getting faster at it, but he's like, I'm there for the research. I'll take you wherever you need to go and do the research, and he does. I mean, I already have pictures from this building from old pictures because he obtained them for me. So,
oh, that's it. He's just in it for the vacations. We see how
that's
it is.
What he's in it for. He's probably going, I can't believe she picked Vancouver. We're 40 minutes from Vancouver.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, Tanya, thank you so much for hanging out with us and sharing all of your insights. I know definitely anybody who is planning to self-publish definitely learned a lot from you here. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think if you're on the fence about editing, just consider it a business expense and get it done. There's, again, only two things that your book really desperately needs that you need to pay for, and that's editing and a cover design. If you want to be taken seriously and you want to have a good reader experience, that is at the core of it. I can tell you that my books would not be the shape that they're in if Victoria hadn't edited them. There'd be sentence structure issues all over the place.
Oh man, I can tell you as an editor, that makes my heart happy. I love hearing that. But be sure to, our viewers here, be sure to follow Tanya, check out her books. There are going to be links to her social media and Amazon pages where you can buy her books in the description box. So please check that out. You will not regret it. I can promise you that. And I believe that's it for today. Again, Tanya, thank you again for joining us. This has been so much fun. And that's it. So if you need anything, viewers, feel free to reach out, leave comments, and I'll see y'all next time.
Thanks.